what they're looking for is for it to be memorable. And that's sort of where we start a lot of conversations.
Hi, everybody. It's Tom Greenwald. Welcome back to the Show Must Go on Sale podcast. Today's guest is Lauren Fitzgerald, and I'm very excited to speak with Lauren because if you have been listening to our podcast so far, we have focused mostly on the Broadway space, whereas today we're talking with Lauren, who lives and breathes off-Broadway theater. She's done some regional theater work in her background. Right now, she is the vice president of marketing at New 42, which includes the venerable Children's and Family Theater Company, the New Victory Theater. She's also worked at Williamstown Theater Festival in the past. She's was in communications at the Blue Man Group. I think it's fair to say there'd be no Broadway without off-Broadway. Many shows on Broadway start off-Broadway. And there would be no adult theatergoers without children theatergoers, which is another really important aspect of what Lauren does. So, Lauren Fitzgerald, welcome to the Show Must Go on Sale.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here.
I think we should let's jump in with what you're doing now. I know you have been at the New 42 for a while, and I know that your primary mission there is to fill the house with families, with children, with the future of theater going, as it were. So I guess my first question to you as a marketing person, do you think that marketing family shows and shows for youth audiences has its own secret sauce? Or do you think marketing a show is marketing a show?
It's definitely secret sauce. Marketing to family audiences, which in this case for most purposes is talking about marketing to parents or caregivers, is competing against a whole load of things that Broadway audiences or adult audiences are not necessarily, or you're not competing for. So when we do a lot of research at the New Victory. When we are doing research around family audiences, how to get them in, the things that they're talking about us competing against aren't other family theaters. We're competing against soccer. We're competing against karate. We're competing against the fact that Sunday dinners happen with the family. So you're trying to convince folks not just to come to this theater versus that theater, or this show versus that show. You're trying to convince them that theater is a really worthy use of their time. And what they're looking for is for it to be memorable. And that's sort of where we start a lot of conversations at the New Victory about how to do our work.
Do you not consider these massive, long-running family shows on Broadway, Disney, of course, comes to mind, as competition for you, as opposed to the lifestyle stuff? Or is that a whole separate animal that you don't even really think about?
I think about them a lot, but I think about them kind of in a different category, and a lot of that has to do with price point. So the average ticket price at the New Victory is about $20. It's a very different proposition than going to see The Lion King. Anytime we do market research, of course it's the first thing that comes up. Have you taken your kids to the theater? Yes, of course. We've seen The Lion King. It's a different planning structure. It's a different entree. It's almost like another category that we're talking about versus the lifestyle stuff.
Wow,
Yeah, $20, right?
Yeah, I'm still stuck on that. That's the average ticket price?
It is, because we do $2 tickets for schools. So if you average out the ticket prices, and $2 tickets is what the theater opened with 30 years ago, and it's never changed, which is incredible. So once you do those tickets plus the public ticket prices, you come out to around $20.
Is some of that because you get some funding from the city and you have some subsidized grants and such? Do you have private donors as well? And is that aspect of it, fundraising, is that part of your gig too, or are you able to stay purely in the marketing wing?
When you work in a nonprofit, it is best as the marketing director to be best friends with the development director, because you are cultivating the same people. So we're sending the same messages. We're trying to get the same people to do the same actions. So yes, that ticket price is very much because of fundraising. I want to keep the ticket price to be affordable, not only, Selling less expensive tickets is not necessarily easier, so it doesn't make my job easier that way, but it keeps us true to our mission. New 42, the larger nonprofit, is also extraordinarily unique. It's 3 brands, really. The New Victory is the consumer brand. New 42 Studios is the B2B brand. And then New 42 writ large, which is also we're the landlords, custodians of the 7 historic theaters on 42nd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, except for the New Amsterdam, the Disney. So that's the donor brand. So I am, as a marketer, I'm still the person who has a great effect on the donor brand.
I'm just going to tell our listeners a little bit too that the New 42 Studios are probably the most popular midtown rehearsal studios for so many shows, Broadway shows, touring companies. You walk into that building and it's a who's who of Broadway folks. So you get your taste of Broadway there too, along with the New Victory off Broadway and youth theater branding.
The elevator is the place to be at the studios.
The elevator is the place to be. When you're building a brand for a show at the New Victory, do you do it kind of the way a Broadway producing entity and a Broadway advertising agency will do it? Do you put out a bunch of designs on the table or on the wall and start to look at them? Do you do any sort of focus groups?
So important to understand that the New Victory is a presenting house. So we're not making any of the shows, we're importing them in from all over the world. Part of the marketing job is to make sure that it makes sense to audiences that all of these very disparate things, which are circus, puppetry, sometimes opera, music, that they all belong in the same place so that they have a New Victory identity, not just their own identities, and that they are appropriate for kids. There are a bunch of things that we program that weren't made for kids. They just happened to be something that our VP of Artistic Programming went to see and loved and said, I think kids would love this circus that was at the Edinburgh Fringe that maybe there weren't even a lot of kids but like this would be awesome in New York for kids.
Does the fact that you are acquiring properties that exist mean that the brand also exists? Do you usually use the, for lack of a better word, the poster art or the key art that's been established elsewhere and import that as well? Or do you like to do your own thing when it comes to branding a show and what it might look like to the New York City marketplace?
It varies a lot. There are some companies who come in that have identities that are really close to what it is that we think will work. All these folks too, a lot of them are coming to New York for the first time from Scotland, from South Africa, from Japan, and they're thrilled to be in New York and they want to get their brand out in New York. So it's a very delicate balance because some of them, what works in Japan isn't going to work here. So we have to have a lot of conversation with artists to say, listen, we really need to take a look at this. We need to educate you about New Victory audiences, about New York City audiences, and sort of take a step back and try something new. I would say that happens half of the time.
Are they usually so thrilled that you're doing the show that they're like, whatever you want? Is there any pushback ever when they hear that you might want to tinker with the brand a little bit?
The pushback usually comes from the folks who haven't been presented for families before, who have a pretty particular idea of how it is they're touring around the world and they're touring venues for grown-ups. That's where the conversation can get a little sticky.
Does that happen a lot with the programming at the New Vic, that there's shows that have not traditionally been marketed to youth audiences until they get to you?
I would say it happens maybe one a year. One a year. Mm-hmm. There's usually somebody who this is just not how they're used to being positioned.
How
they're kind of my favorite conversations. I don't know, the stuff that's really straightforward and already done.
Yeah.
You do, but I do. The exciting stuff is the stuff that you have to really dig into and figure out.
Yeah. And there's probably a little delicacy involved when you're dealing with artists who either might bring some bias into the idea that this is now being marketed to children, their artistic baby, which which you probably have to help them get used to the idea that you're showing it to a new audience. I'm sure 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, it ends up being great for all involved. But I would imagine the beginning of that process might require a little diplomacy.
There's a lot of trust building involved. Because we do international presenting, the New Victory is very well known in the presenting world internationally. So folks are generally thrilled to come to the New Victory. They think they're coming to Broadway most of the time. we
It's really close to Broadway. It's like
is.
right around the corner.
I don't really love
funny.
bursting the bubble of, they're posting on social media, we're coming to Broadway.
Oh,
Think,
yeah.
well,
That's funny. Yeah.
I'm not going to correct you most of the time.
No.
Only in our
What's
own
the point?
materials. Right?
Yeah. What's the
You're
point?
one seat away from coming to Broadway.
You really are. You're $200 away if you're charging $20 a ticket, though. But one seat away. I'm sure the endings are usually happy indeed when they see what they do have at the New Vic, which is such a gem. Do you participate in the audience data analysis survey focus group, that whole world that Broadway has dived into for so many decades? Do you have previews that lead to performances? Do you tweak the marketing based on what people are saying to you about the show? Does all that stuff happen at the New Vic?
The runs are so short, and we generally
long are
do
they?
not have. A typical run is 2 to 3 weeks at the New Victory. So on the weekdays, there are school shows, and then the weekend, there's public shows. We have enough time that if we really know something is not landing, months beforehand, because, sometimes we're marketing a show as part of the overall season. Our marketing is starting 6 months in advance of a show. So if we know that this is not resonating with anyone, then yes, we have time to change it months before it opens. And we will redo a campaign. We will ask for new photography. We'll ask for new video. Maybe the company has done another engagement somewhere, and we'll spend time with them redoing those materials. Once something's up, there's not really time. There's barely time for word of mouth, which is something that is challenging about it. So a lot of what we do is spend our time trying to build trust with audiences that by coming to the New Victory, generally, you're going to see something that you love. So you have to trust us and buy it because you know our taste by now.
Is a subscription audience something that you are after with your marketing approach? Is it a bread and butter situation for you guys like it can be for the Roundabout or Manhattan Theater Club? Do you like to try to start by building your subscription audiences? What's the subscription versus single tickets attitude in the marketing department that you run?
When I started, quite a number of years ago now, 18 years ago at New 42, the New Victory subscriptions made up about half of the audience base, which was great, easy. It is post-pandemic for anyone. It is just not that. And, in New Victory audiences, I started 3 generations ago. So what we talk about in the marketing department all the time is that somebody like the Roundabout gets somebody, if they're really lucky, in their 20s, and then maybe they can keep them till they die. And what we get is what we try to get you with programming when we can afford the programming for the youngest kids possible. I took my son at 6 months to the New Victory. Then we get to keep you until you go to high school. And then that's it. And high school is even pushing it, because something that happens at the New Victory is when you start really young, is that kids don't want to, when they're in middle school, go somewhere that they went when they were really little. It's a place for little kids. So our churn is intense. And we are, I think, on the cutting edge of learning what it is that theater goers want, because we have the youngest ticket buyer. Our ticket buyer average age is around 40. So these folks are telling us, for the rest of the industry in many ways, how they want to participate with an organization. And subscription is not it. We are in the middle right now of relaunching it's called a membership program for us, relaunching it for next season. And it's going to be less restrictive, more flexibility. It's going to reflect more of what it is that families think of as a membership in the city now.
It's funny you say the thing about churn and how older kids don't want to do what they were doing when they were younger kids. I mentioned to you before we started, I write children's books, and if I write a series for children, you have to keep the characters the same age the whole time. They can't age. It's like Bart Simpson, who's been 9 years old for 40, because a kid who's reading a series when they're 11 doesn't want to be reading that same series when they're 14. They want to move on. Harry Potter's the exception. She did whatever she wanted because she sold gazillions, but every other series out there is kind of stuck in place. So I get what you're saying about the churn. You said did you say you took your 6-month-old to the theater? What did he think?
The show. It was a show for 0 to 3-year-olds. So
what's that like?
Oh my God, we did this beautiful production from a company called Spellbound, which is Brooklyn based, called Shakespeare Stars. And it was actors and artists performing Shakespearean phrases and with beautiful set pieces that they put in front of the kids. And oh my God, he loved it.
How often does a 0 to 3 show figure into your season?
I wish so much more. They are the most expensive things to produce, to present, to bring, because it's the fewest audience members. You don't pack in $4.99 when you have 0 to 3-year-olds. So we try to put one on the schedule a year. Those people stay with us. You know, if that's your very first experience, then you also have something indelible on your memory with the organization.
Yeah. And also a 4-year-old won't say, I'm not going back to where I was when I was 6 months old, the way a 14-year-old will say that. They're less discerning that way. Can I ask you about the marketing to parents, which you mentioned at the beginning? We talk about that a lot at our ad agency when we have shows that are family-oriented. Like, how do you split the difference? Obviously, you err on the side of marketing to the parents, but not always. So if you can give me a ballpark percentage of marketing to parents versus marketing to kids, and what's the difference in terms of how you market to parents versus how you market to kids?
When we do research around our patrons about how they decide, it's interesting. The primary person who's the decider in the family, who is usually a woman in our research, is sometimes showing the kids videos. This is when we think about it. So, hey, I'm trying to decide about this, this, and this. Do you want to look? Do you want to see and decide?
Or for the sake of argument, the kid might be anywhere from 6 to 14 in that scenario?
Yeah, I'd bring it down to 12. We kind of lose folks around 12. Unless they're super theater heads and they're really into the circuses, for example. Marketing to kids is a different business than marketing to parents. The resources we have for the New Victory, I always laugh when I'm in seminars around Broadway marketing, because we're spending on a show, if we're lucky, what a low budget Broadway marketing is spending in a week, maybe. And that's spent for the entirety of the time that it's on sale, which could be 8 months. So it's just such a different game. And with that limited resource, it's parents.
Do you have the budget for parent influencers and parent online advocacy groups and stuff like that? Because, of course, influencer is one of the buzzwords now in the Broadway advertising conference rooms around town. I feel like one of the more successful demonstrations of how influencers can work effectively is in the parent family space. So I'd assume, especially with your limited budgets, that that works its way into your plan somewhat. Is that true?
100%. The family influencers make pieces about the experience of going to the theater so much better than we could. It's through their eyes, it's through the reflection of how they're experiencing their kids doing it. It's extremely effective for us and has introduced us to also niche audiences that we haven't been able to reach before. We spend a lot of attention on sensory friendly shows, and reaching that audience in particular through family influencers has been really effective.
One of the things I mentioned, because influencers, of course, is now, as I said, part of the Broadway advertising media plan landscape in general. You mentioned early on that, and I mentioned early on that without kids going to the theater, you won't have adults going to the theater. It's such an important habit for them to get into early. Have you done some research that indicates what kind of legacy you are passing along to the Broadway world? How much do we have to thank you, I guess is my question. Because I'm sure there's evidence out there that indicates how going to a show at the New Victory might affect their attitude toward going to shows as 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and on and on and on. Have you done any research to that effect?
We have, and it does so much. When our team is feeling a little tired, I try to remind them that we're saving the future of Broadway. To be dramatic
That's not
about
hyperbole, people. No, it's not dramatic. No hyperbole.
So we did a research project in 2018 with our friends at ERM Research, and I have this in various notes here because I wanted to talk about this today. In the study of people in the New York metro area, 600 folks surveyed, and it wasn't talking specifically about the New Victory in this case. It was talking about theater going generally. 78% of the people who identified as attending heavily as adults, so frequent Broadway theater goers, started going to theater before they finished elementary school. Starting young is one of the most important things that we can do in order to ensure the future of our field. Heavy attenders now are more than 2 times likely to have seen a show by pre-K than non-attendees. So those 0 to 3-year-old shows, I mean, pre-K is before you're 4. They were twice as likely to have seen a show before they were 4 years old. And this semi-depressing one, 51% of adults who don't attend theater today, and this was just like, I don't go, is how they answered the survey. They didn't attend theater growing up.
Do you have any relationship with the Broadway community as a result of this kind of information where they have a lot of skin in the game in terms of watching you guys succeed so that they can reap the benefits of that down the road? Has that resulted in any sort of cooperative programming of any kind, or any sort of grants offered by the league, or anything that expresses how important and how symbiotic the relationship really is and should be between youth theater and Broadway theater, not just the Disney shows, but all the other important youth theater that's going on, especially with you guys?
Well, we were really, really proud this past year that we received the Tony Honors for Excellence in the theater. New 42 did. This was part of everything's a campaign. This was part of what we campaigned on. And I felt like I felt like it was heard really differently last year than it's been heard some other times. And I mean, some of that is because the worry about the field is at an all-time high. To me, it feels. Because of New 42 Studios, too, we have really great relationships with Broadway producers, with the large nonprofit companies. And a lot of them are increasingly supportive of it as I think they start to understand what this cycle looks like. And also as there's more and more family work on Broadway.
The model of how advances are built on Broadway has changed radically over the last 10, 20 years. The word advance is almost a misnomer now because so many people are buying tickets so much closer into performance dates that they want to see. Do you worry about that at all? Has that affected how the advances, if you even care about such a thing, are built for your shows? And the back end of that is when people leave the theater. On Broadway, word of mouth is king. Obviously, people market shows and people spend money. But if people leaving the building don't tell other people to go see the show, none of that matters. Does that affect your success level and bottom line at all?
The closer to date buying is what keeps me up at night. I used to be able to tell we have, 10, 11 shows in a season. And I used to be able to tell you fairly early what was going to do well and what wasn't. And I can't tell you anymore. I mean, I know if something's really not going to do well. I have a harder time telling what's going to do well and then how to allocate resources around it.
When you say used to, do you mean before pandemic versus after? Do you kind of delineate that as the marker?
I think it's more like 10 years ago that gap started to close. Our close to date ticket sales can be in a $4.99 seat house. For a weekend can be half the houses easily. 10 years ago, definitely, we'd be 70% sold 2 weeks. That was the key at that point. 2 weeks is when you were like, oh, we're going to put money into this or we're going to cut our losses. It's very hard to tell. The short runs, word of mouth is so hard to move on it. And there is some effect, I think, that's, I suppose, in the positive, in the closure of that before date ticket buying, because it used to be that there was a 2 week run and people bought tickets 2 weeks in advance. So if you saw it the first weekend, people weren't going to come the next weekend. Not true, but still doesn't have a chance to build the kind of steam that you talk about.
So if it doesn't have a chance to build the head of steam, which is obvious because of the short runs, and you're biting your nails because you're waiting for the advance to build, does that mean the kind of sales trajectory of a show that might have a 2 week run or a 3 week one is kind of established for better or for worse in that kind of 2 week window before the first performance of any given show?
We go on sale in May for a season that starts in the school year. So I can count on, for most things that are going to do well, I can count on a base of maybe 40% before we open. The rest of that happens within that 2 week time.
My last question about your world is about the kinds of shows you produce, because Broadway has an ongoing argument with itself about famous IP, famous titles versus new titles, because the seduction of famous titles and people knowing what they're getting is very strong, but the track record of the biggest hits on Broadway reveals that the less people know about the show, the more likely they are to love it so much that they will turn it into a word-of-mouth hit. Everything from Hamilton to Mormon to O'Mary to the list is endless of kind of shows that people knew nothing about and became huge hits. I know TheaterWorks, which is another youth theater in town, does a lot of great work, but as far as I know, most of their work comes from adapting famous IP and very successful book series and other things that families might know about beforehand. My hunch is that you guys don't really take that tack, and a lot of the stuff you produce is is unfamiliar to the vast majority of people who might go to your shows. How do you handle that challenge, and how are you, especially with kind of the unforgiving ticket buying patterns that we've talked about? How do you handle the heavy lift of the education and telling people, no, trust us, you don't know what this is, but it's amazing. You have your track record, of course, but is there anything else you do to kind of mitigate that education gap that someone like TheaterWorks might not have to deal with?
We do some IP, and some of that planning for making the things that are lesser known successful, to me, is making sure that the IP is in places that you can anchor and count on. So we're doing Fraggle Rock this year. We're going on sale next week. The people are going crazy for it already. I awesome. I love Fraggle Rock. I love just as much the Japanese circus that we're doing in the spring that no one has ever heard of, and is one of these shows that presents themselves for audiences that are grown-ups, and we have to do a lot of work on. And I listened to the episode with you and Drew, and I loved hearing, because I felt validated, about explaining to people what they're going to feel. And that's a lot of what we do around those shows. And increasingly, we're actually taking the tact of splitting our marketing into, let's tell you about the show, because we know that people buy based on what the thing is on stage. But if you don't know a lot about it, let's spend some more money telling you about what you're going to experience at the theater. And maybe the show isn't as relevant as the fact that you're going to come and have an hour of free activities before the show opens, so that this experience for your family can extend. You don't have to entertain your kids for one more hour than you thought you didn't have to entertain your kids. And they're going to meet the performers, and they're going to get their photos taken with them. And this is something that they're going to remember forever and ever. And you, parent, are going to win. You are going to make a decision that is going to make you feel like a hero, that doesn't cost very much, and it doesn't matter that you've never heard of this Japanese circus before. Good on you for introducing your kids to another culture. You're amazing. That's a tactic that we take.
Good. I'll tell Drew too. He always likes he always likes to know that philosophy extends out into the world. I lied about the last question because I want to ask one nuts and bolts question, because I think people will be interested. A typical media plan for you, which, as you said, a week on Broadway might be 4 months for you. What does it include? Does it include things like video? And are you able to run television commercials in any sort of way? Is everything digital and social? Can you give us just a quick snapshot of how that might break down?
There's no print. We cut print out of our budgets probably 12 years ago. The cost of it kept going up, and we realized that the effectiveness of it was going nowhere. So it's all digital, except for, I believe in subway posters in such a big way for us. And when we talk about marketing to kids, those in particular, I know because they tell me are conversation starters for them. A kid sees something that's eye-catching, they see the word kid on it, might be for them. It's sparks for them. Outdoor, every once in a great while, if we find a super scrappy deal. And no broadcast. We do all of our content in-house because of the high volume of it too. We have photo and video folks in-house, as well as graphic designers. So we are our own creative agency.
As it has to be. It's probably fun, but it also financially obviously has to be. Has there been a campaign for a show or an institution or anything that you've seen in the last, say, 10 years, on Broadway, off Broadway, anywhere, that made you go, ooh, that's an effective campaign. That's the kind of campaign that I can appreciate.
So I was like the high schooler who went and bought the New York Times at the Wawa in Pennsylvania to look at all the ads.
The Arts and Leisure.
But what always comes to mind for me, and I was also, because it was made for me, is when Phantom did that "You Will Never Forget Your First Time" ad. I thought,
Yeah.
This is just the smartest thing I've ever seen. Everything it was meant to do, it did it in that simple way. It did all of it. And I reference that ad a bunch when we talk about trying to get people to come back to see us.
That's a great example because a lot of recency bias in the answers that I've gotten from a lot of people, like, "Oh, Mary is great." And "Oh, Mary is great," but it's top of mind, obviously. But you're reaching back into the vault. Lauren Fitzgerald, thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing the Lord's work in terms of building audiences for not only yourself, but for everybody else who works in the theater business, especially on the Broadway stages, where the desperate need to build audiences has never been felt more acutely. And without the 0 to 3-year-olds going and wreaking havoc in the tent, there's no Broadway of tomorrow. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us on The Show Must Go On Sale.